Okay, once again, the hazards of making these videos at home. I think we've got the Dulce, the dog, under control. So we'll pick right up. So again, this emphasis on words that we might not teach to the entire 5th grade class, but for our Carters and our Jose's and our Marias, we need to be thinking not just of those essential Tier 2 words that everybody's going to need instruction in, but also those Tier 2 minus words that I say, you know, my Jimmy and my Mary, who come from those college-educated parents and so forth, are good, strong readers. I don't need to teach those words necessarily. Lonely, for instance. But you know, in this case, I may have to emphasize them. I may need that small group prior to that reading to say, hey guys, I know we just did some vocabulary with the whole class, but there's a few more words that I think you guys ought to hear before we start, because they're really important in what we're going to read. And I give some, some explicit instruction, and we interact a little bit around those just right Goldilocks Tier 2 minus words with our strugglers, our needier kids. Boom, and then we get into the reading. All right, now what I want to put an emphasis on here and show you, actually really remind you, because it is something we did in the fall, is this idea of emphasis on pre-teaching. If I've got a Carter, if you remember that profile in the Lasso book, who's really going to struggle with comprehending a given text because of vocabulary, again, that places the emphasis on me supporting him by doing more pre-teaching of vocabulary. Now, of course, this is good for everyone, but absolutely critical for the Carters, for the Marias, the ELLs, and so forth. So let me take you here to the table, and we'll do the best we can in terms of showing this. This is something we did in the fall as a class. If you remember, I brought out several sort of pre-teaching of vocabulary around the Mayan civilization. Let's say a reading in upper elementary in social studies. And this was called List Group Label. I select a good, healthy set of words from the upcoming reading. They can't be all unknown words, or the kids have nowhere to go with this. So kind of a nice balance of words like kings and nobles that hopefully they know, supernatural, and some others like ritual and glyphs and bloodletting that they may not. Okay, what I like about this is that it, number one, is pre-teaching. Number two, it's a chance to really get some essential and some accessible words in. And number three, it's a nice interactive social kind of setting. So we won't do a lot with it here because we did do it in the fall, but I've selected this set of words. I can put them up on the overhead or give each group its list. I have groups, let's say, 4 groups of 5 students. Their job is to, I've listed, their job is to group. I say put the words together in groups that sort of have something in common, that they seem to belong together. Once you have your words all grouped, then think of a label for them. So, again, you'll probably remember this from the fall class. We did things, and I had people share out. So we did things like, nobles and kings and merchants, those, and we would group those together and call them people. We might say something like ritual and myth and shamanism, and call this, and supernatural, and call it religion, and so forth. Now, we may come to some words that we've thrown in there that kids truly have no idea about. They say, Mr. Maniac, I don't know what this, we didn't necessarily know in our class what Stella was, or bloodletting. I have no idea. Okay, so when we share out, I go around and I could say, you can have a group that is totally unknown words, or you can put them where you think they may fit, just, speculating, just predicting, and we'll check later. When we share out, we say, okay, each group, tell me one of your groups of words and get the label you put. And then tell me the words that you have no clue about. So the first group says, oh, we have nobles, kings, merchants, and we put those under people. Great. Then we had no idea what stela was. And then maybe I list that on the board. Group 2, another group, and they say ritual, shamanism, myth, supernatural. We put that under religion. And we had no idea at all what bloodletting was, and so forth. And we keep going along. Then I have the opportunity to pre-teach the words that they have no clue about. So we're preparing to comprehend the upcoming text. This is, it's quick, it's interactive. Students get to share their ideas. My low ELL students get to benefit from maybe the knowledge of Mary and Joe, who have those college-educated parents and higher vocabulary, language skills coming in, and so forth. So I'm not the only source of knowledge of these words. Then we can revisit these after the social studies text reading. I say, okay, I want you to take out your list group label sheet and decide if you need to change some things. And take the words, if you had a column that was words we just have no clue about, now you need to get those into their right groups. And then they can work through them again. So there's a nice pre and post sense to this. So a very nice thing for, to prepare really all students, there's no question, but essential for, our ELL students, our students who are really going to struggle with essential words in a pre-teaching kind of way. All right, the other thing I want to show you that's very tricky with vocabulary instruction, and again, we've seen this, I think, in the fall, and it was an emphasis in the Beck and McCowan book, is this idea of assessment of vocabulary. So difficult, again. You think, you're going to read about the levels of knowing a word, and, and it's difficult to get into vocabulary assessment outside of a one-to-one setting. Here's what I recommend, what we used in the vocabulary research. It's a snapshot kind of thing. There could be problems with it. We could all point out limitations to it, but we saw it in the spring. It gives us that sort of progress monitoring, more for tinkering with our instruction than anything else. Just a basic sort of sentence fill in. I take a subset of the words. If you're teaching 15 words, you don't necessarily need to, and you want to know whether your instruction is sufficient, you don't need to test all 15 of those words. I can take a subset, 4, 5, 6 words, build this kind of fill-in sentence, have my students can all work at the same time. You can see that this would take no more than about 10 minutes. We can, correct it at the end so it can actually be an instructional activity to reinforce. And I get a snapshot. If this comes back and I see that, 16 out of 22 of my kids were 8 out of 8 on this, then I go, my instruction's pretty solid. Then if 6 out of those 22 are about 2 or 3 or 4 out of 8, I go, my general instruction is good because the majority of my kids are getting these. Now I have a small group that I need to do something to sort of differentiate, to intensify the instruction. Conversely, if out of my 22 students, I've got 15 who are 5 and below out of 8, then I say, no, there's something wrong with my general instructional approach and I need to do something for the whole class. Okay, so this gives a lot of easy information. I really encourage it. You can do it with social studies words, do it with science words, do it with literary words, do it with the target vocabulary. Very easy, very quick, and it gives you a wealth of information in terms of how your instruction's working and with who. All right, let's go on. We're going to pick up now I think what we really want to make the focus of this week, which is this idea of strategic processing, skills and strategies needed to comprehend text. Of course, that's going to be a focus for all of our students in, say, from 3rd grade on in upper elementary grade instruction, where we get kids who are more and more fluent, now we're going to really want to build their strategic processing of text. And really, I'm going to give some of the characteristics I think that make for good comprehension instruction for struggling students. Not all that different for an entire class, if you ask me. Since this is the calculus of reading instruction, it's more abstract, it's more strategic, it's not as cut and dry for our strugglers and really for our entire class. How can we make this as concrete as possible? You know, you throw out a lot of abstract terms with kids, and you might as well simply be assigning and assessing. Our instruction needs to take these more sort of abstract strategic processes and try and make them as concrete as possible. The next point is I kind of use the carrot here, focused as possible. What you're going to see, and you're going to see it in the reading this week, there are 100 good things to do in terms of reading comprehension for kids. But if we try and use 100 different activities, it's the shotgun effect. We're going to lose. Kids aren't going to get anything because they're always doing something new. We believe in very focused instruction. Let's boil this down to a key set of 4 or 5 things that we're going to continually come back to in terms of teaching strategic processing. Of course, they're going to be the 4 or 5 that we think are the biggest bang for the buck, that we get the best, benefit from. And then we stick with them, we practice them, we use them across units and across different kinds of text, across content areas, and we make it very focused instruction. So the kids have a chance to grow into these strategic processes. Not just know what they are, but be able to apply them strategically and independently. That takes a lot of focused instruction. Next, I really like this term and this emphasis on guided practice. You cannot just tell a struggling 4th grader, really even a proficient 4th grader, all right, I want you to read this science, these first 2 paragraphs in the science reading, and tell me the main idea. That is going back to more of an assign and assess mentality. It is not easy to construct a main idea in a text, and so we carefully guide them. We construct, text where they can be successful, and we show them a process, and then slowly we show them, little wrinkles on that, and slowly we move towards more natural or complex texts to get in that guided practice. So you can never just dump kids in when it comes to strategic processing. You have to carefully guide them towards success. All right, let me show you what this looks like in a few lessons. Now, these are materials, again, we might have seen before, but now let's put a special lens on through which we're seeing this, which is kids who are going to struggle. Kids who, are not going to respond easily to things like, what's the main idea? Where do we find the information to answer this question? And so forth. What kind of question is this? Kids who are going to get lost in that terminology, lost in the abstractness, not know how to begin. Okay, so this is a lesson. Again, I think we've seen some of this in my classes last year, but around this big bang for the buck activity, teaching main idea. So much of reading comprehension, and if you think of reading standardized tests, so many questions boil down to, can kids separate, out these main ideas, the main concepts, and so forth. All right? So again, we want to teach this in as concrete a way as possible, and then provide guided practice. So here was my effort to make this very concrete. When we find the main idea, we teach them to ask, who or what is this about? In simple terms, who is the main who? Of course, we tell them, when we say who, we don't always mean, maybe it's a bear, maybe it's an animal, maybe it's a mineral, maybe, so, it's not always a person, but who or what is this about? And then what are they or what do they do? What is the main action? Or in the simplest terms, who is the main who? What is the main what? Put these together and you have the main idea. So we've taken something fairly abstract, find the main idea. We've tried to make it very concrete by saying, who is the main who? What is the main what? Now, what we have to show them is, again, this is this carefully guided practice. Many times there is more than one who or more than one what, more than one action. In this case, think, what kind of thing are they? Do they all belong to the same category? So, for example, if you read about cats, dogs, horses, and cows, how would you answer, who is this about? We want them to think of the category, animals or farm animals, something like that. If you read that a kid went home and read, did math, practiced spelling, and wrote a paragraph, how would you answer, what is the main action? What category do these things belong to? Doing homework. Okay, then notice that I've created some, and again, we've seen these before, I think, but think about it for our strugglers, some very, very specific beginning texts that are built for kids to apply this concrete strategy and be successful. The little bird gathered some sticks from the ground and took them to the pine tree. She wove the sticks together. She added a bit of soft string to make her soft nest. Who's the main who? The little bird. Now, there's variety of actions. What's the main what? Made a nest. And, let's practice that, this carefully guided practice, where they're either going to have to combine the who's and give it a category, or combine the what's and give it a category. Now, this is a far stretch from jumping into the social studies reading on the Mayans and being able to pull out a main idea. So we have to carefully bridge the gap. We've created guided practice to make this very concrete, to help kids learn the strategy, be successful. But then we have to continue down that line until they can do this with naturally occurring text in social studies or science, right? Now, let me take this just one step further. So for instance, to get farther along, we say, now, we've been working on main idea. Who is the main who? What is the main what? Now we're going to see that sometimes there's distracting information. There's information that's not as important to the main idea. We call it distracting. It can take us away. We need to be able to identify that, put it aside to find our main idea. So we ask ourselves, what are most of the sentences or information about? That will be the main idea. Is there only one sentence that adds something different? That will likely be distracting information. So we've created a couple of passages. So Linda got out eggs, flour, and milk. The eggs were from her aunt's chickens. She also got out her measuring spoons and so forth. So of course the main idea is Linda's making cookies. We can emphasize what's the distracting information here. The eggs from her aunt's chickens. Yeah, it doesn't really contribute to the main what, which is the making cookies. And so we give some practice with that. Here's one more step. Now, as we move closer to natural text, we see, the main what or the main who is not always an action. Sometimes it might be a when. Sometimes it might be a where. And so again, we teach that the main what may be where they do something, when they do something, or why they do something. So football is a popular sport. You can play football in the park. You can play football in your yard. You have plenty of room. It can also be very exciting to play football in the snow. Main who or what playing football. Now this happens to be a where main idea. You can play football in many places. And so this kind of concrete, carefully guided practice until kids are ready to apply this in naturally occurring text. This is the kind of comprehension instruction that research tells us really pays off with struggling students. Other kinds of things, more sort of abstract, hey, read the first 2 paragraphs, decide the main idea. We might as well be waving a wand out there. Our struggling students, and for the most part, even our regularly performing students, the task is too abstract, too difficult. We need to make it very focused, very concrete, and lead them step by step towards success. Build that bridge then. Yes, they do have to do this in the social studies text, in a nonfiction challenging reading. And we need to think about the steps that it'll take to get them there. Okay, so this is some very, challenging kinds of stuff. Let's go. Where are we at, honey?
2105.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. Let this be an example. I want to show a couple other, ways of going about this, but I think that stands as a good example of what we mean when we talk about teaching strategic processing to kids who are going to struggle. We can't lowball this. We can't simply assign it. We have to teach with great specificity, great detail, try and make things as concrete as possible, give little devices like who is the main who, what is the main what, and then improvise off that. Hey, sometimes the main what is a where. All keeping it within the realm of concrete, doable sorts of things. Let kids practice it, gain some confidence, and then bump up the level, say, of the text. All right, that's it for me today. You're going to get in, have a good week with the readings. Again, it's going to be a lot of information. Try and use this as an overview to sort of hang your hat, and I look forward to joining you on the discussion. Last week we were at Water Ramp Camp with Danya, flipping into the water up at Steamboat, so apologies for not being quite as prompt in some of the grading and participation. Look forward to getting back with you this week. Enjoy.